patient type. "Go away," Luca said. "You're not wanted around here, Mr. What is your name anyway?" The see-through Rashid smiled a friendly smile that somehow was not entirely friendly. He began to explain in a kindly voice that somehow did not feel completely kind. "I am your father's dad." "Don't say that word," Luca shouted. "The point I'm trying to make, if I may be allowed to continue," the Phantom insisted, "is that everyone's dead." "Don't say it," Luca yelled. "Is different," the Phantom said. "No two are alike. Each living being is an individual unlike all others. Their lives have unique and personal beginnings, personal and unique middles. And consequently, at the end, it follows that everyone has their own unique and personal dead." "Don't!" screamed Luca. "And I am your father's. Or I will be soon enough. And at that time, you will no longer be able to see through me. Because then I will be the real thing, and he, I'm sorry to say, will no longer be at all." "Nobody's going to take my father away," Luca cried. "Not even you, Mr. Whatever your name is with your scary tales." "Nobody," said the see-through Rashid. "Yes, you can call me that. That's who I am. Nobody is going to take your father away. That's exactly right. And I am the nobody in question. I am your, you might say, Nobo-Daddy." That's nonsense," said Luca. No, the see-through Rashid corrected him. "I'm afraid that nonsense is not involved. You will discover that I am a no-nonsense kind of guy." Luca sat down on the front step of the house and put his head in his hands. Nobo-Daddy, he understood what the see-through Rashid was telling him. As his father faded away, the Phantom Rashid would grow stronger, and in the end there would be only this Nobo-Daddy and no father at all. But he was very sure of one thing. He was not ready to do without a father. He would never be ready for that. The certainty of this knowledge grew in him and gave him strength. There was only one thing for it, he told himself. This Nobo-Daddy had to be stopped, and he had to think of a way to stop him. "To be fair," said Nobo-Daddy, "and in a spirit of full disclosure, I should repeat that you have already achieved something extraordinary, by crossing the line, I mean. So perhaps you're capable of further extraordinary things. Maybe you're even capable of bringing about the thing you are right now dreaming up. Maybe you will succeed in bringing about my destruction. An adversary, how enjoyable. How positively darling. I'm so excited." Luca looked up. "What do you mean exactly, crossing the line?" he said. "Here, where you are, is not there where you were," explained Nobo-Daddy helpfully. "This, all of this that you see, is not that which you saw before. This lane is not that lane, this house is not that house, and this daddy, as I have explained, is not that one. If the whole of your world took half a step to the right, then it would bump into this world. If it took half a step to the left, well, let's not go into that right now. Don't you see how much more brightly colored everything is here than back home? This, you see, I shouldn't even tell you really, this is the world of magic." Luca remembered his stumble in the doorway and his brief but intense feeling of giddiness. Was that when he crossed the line? And had he stumbled to the right or to the left? Must have been the right, mustn't it? If so, this must be the right-hand path, must it not? But was that the best path for him? Shouldn't he, as a left-handed person, have stumbled to the left? He realized that he really had no idea what he was talking about. Why was he on any sort of path at all, and not just in the lane outside his house? Where might such a path lead? And should he even think of going down it? Should he be thinking about just getting away from this alarming Nobo-Daddy and finding his way back to the safety of his bedroom? All this talk of magic was much too much for him. Of course, Luca knew all about the world of magic. He had grown up hearing about it from his father every day, and he had believed in it. He had even drawn maps and painted pictures of it. The torrent of words flowing into the lake of wisdom, the mountain of knowledge, the fire of life, all that stuff. But he hadn't believed in it in the way that he believed in dining tables, or streets, or stomach upsets. It hadn't been real in the way that love was real, or unhappiness, or fear. It was only real in the way that stories were real while you were reading them, or heat mirages before you got too close to them, or dreams while you were dreaming. Is this a dream then, he wondered? And the see-through Rashid, who called himself Nobo Daddy, nodded slowly in a thoughtful way. That would certainly explain the situation, he replied agreeably. Why not put it to the test? I'll stop there. I should just say, before we start, I should explain that the word Nobo Daddy is not my coinage. It actually was invented by William Blake. And there is, in fact, a poem that Blake wrote called To Nobo Daddy. Nobo Daddy for Blake was God. It was the absent father, the father who was never there, never did anything, didn't answer your questions, didn't help you. And he has a poem called To Nobo Daddy, which is a complaint against God for being such a useless father. You know? And I mean, Joyce used it too. I think it's in Finnegan's Wake somewhere, borrowed from Blake. So in this book, of course, he's not really a figure of God. He's more, as you heard, he's more a figure of death. But I just wanted to give credit where it was due. And William Blake, not me.
Backstage, we had been discussing Nobo Daddy, and I'd suggested that my own children would immediately understand the logic of Nobo Daddy. And then I learned about Joyce and Blake as well. But in that children have an immediate access to certain kinds of verbal play and language and the meaning behind them. And in fact, I think my first question stays with this very theme, and it's so evident in that lovely sequence you just read for us. One of the novel's most compelling dimensions is what I think of as a very sympathetic rendering of a child's sense of the world, which is to say, a sense of the world is more intensely lived, as full of greater possibilities than an adult would ever allow. Luca doesn't play hockey against another team, he plays against an enemy. He's very naturally drawn to seek answers to what you describe as enormous questions, with a capital E and a capital Q, about the origins of life itself, etc. How did your sympathy to a child's outsized imagination and higher order curiosity influence your own writing in this novel?
You know, I think I'm basically 12 years old. I think that's, well, to answer you seriously, I think when I started out, I mean, like when I wrote Midnight's Children, it was very much a novel written from the sensibility, from the childhood point of view, you know, so the children were the point of view characters, you know, and the adult world was up there. And as Salim grew up, it still remained the case that he was somehow had the kind of innocence of a child, you know, in a world which was beating him up more and more. There's a point later in my life, I suppose about the time when I actually became a father, when I became aware of a shift in my perspective, that I was suddenly writing from the grown-up's point of view and not from the child's, you know. And so one of the great pleasures of both these books, of both Haroun and the Sea of Stories and this one, was trying to rediscover that other perspective, you know, trying to think myself back into the skin of a child. And of course, it helps if you have children, because then you can cheat, you know, and pretend that their brilliant perceptions are yours.
Well, actually, on that point, one of the things that I've read about Luca in some of your other interviews is that, if I'm not mistaken, your son Milan was your first reader and your first critic.
Yeah, it was very pleasurable. I had my agent and publishers saying, "Where the hell is the book?" And I said, "Well, you can't read it because my son hasn't finished reading it." They said, "Well, why hasn't he finished reading it?" I said, "Well, you know, he's got chemistry homework, so maybe he'll be able to read it at the weekend." It was so nice. My agent, Andrew Wiley, is not used to not getting his way. Anyway, so I launched Milan at him. But no, he did. He was absolutely the first reader. And in the same way as my older son, Zafar, was the first reader of Haroun, and they were both very good. They were very good critics.